Somebody sent in this beautiful picture. They felt God reminding them of Isaiah 43 verse 19. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. They felt God was saying He's creating a new thing in these days. At the moment it's just an embryo, protected and small. God would invite us to move our perspective to seeing Him through His eyes, to seek Him, and we will see new opportunities which we'll be able to move into, partnering with Him in His creation.
The children and leaders of Kids Zone took part in the prayer day as well, and they used ropes to climb down into a valley that they imagined in the garden. And then they asked God to help them, and then they climbed up those ropes, making sure that they said thank you to God for rescuing them.
Someone had a picture of huge warrior angels marching through Glasgow, waving huge banners made of the prayers of God's people, and as they marched, the enemy fled in fear ahead of them. They were reminded of 1 Chronicles 14 verse 15. When you hear a sound like marching feet in the tops of the poplar trees, go out and attack. That will be the signal that God is moving ahead of you to strike down the Philistine army.
Someone else was drawn to Revelation 3 verses 15 to 20 and Revelation 2 verses 3 to 5. Both of these verses are really challenging to the people of God about their lukewarmness and lack of commitment. But they end up in a very positive place and a very victorious place. And the promise there that if we do humble ourselves and do pray and reach out to God, we will be drawn into His presence. We will be victorious. Someone, when they were praying, was drawn to Genesis 32 verse 27 and the statement from God, I am the Lord, is anything too hard for me? And they were reminded of the time in 2 Samuel when God had sent a plague on the people of Israel, and many had died, and King David called out to God, and God stopped the plague, and David brought the land back to God. Another person felt God giving them a challenging word about God separating cities between sheep and goats, and how Glasgow needed to have a Nineveh type experience where we would turn to Him in sackcloth and ashes so that we could once again be brought back into the sheepfold. The same person felt God challenging us about idolatry and witchcraft and encouraging us to reject all of these elements in our lives wherever we might find them. And lastly, they felt God talking about the church itself becoming once again a place where people would come for the truth, where speech would be clear and the truth would be undiluted, where we'd be able to speak the words of life to a needy world. Two people went up to Mugdock Park to where the gun emplacements are from World War II, and they were placed there to protect Glasgow during the war from enemy bombers that were flying overhead. And they focused on the full verse of 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and I will heal their lands. It struck them that the verse is a challenge to God's people, not to Glasgow or anyone else, but to us first and foremost. So they found themselves being humbled. How do they measure up? And what does this say to them, first of all? A couple of things to note from their visit up there. The first one, storms don't matter. It was stormy when they were there, but that didn't matter because whatever our circumstances, we're just to focus on God and listen to what He is saying. Secondly, numbers don't matter. When God says my people, there's no condition on the number of people. We should just focus on ourselves individually first and focus ourselves on God. Even if it was only a remnant of God's people, that's enough. We must just obey on behalf of Glasgow. Thirdly, your role doesn't matter. We should humble ourselves, have no arrogance or assumption about our purpose or our role. We should simply seek God, putting Him first, and listen for His voice. They prayed a prayer while they were there. Forgive our worldliness, Lord. We seek your face first of all. Not necessarily your words just yet, just your very presence, your face, knowing your countenance upon us. As they prayed on and more outwardly, the wartime lookout posts seemed to be more significant for Glasgow. Perhaps a reminder for us as watchmen and women of God to stand in the gaps for others and look out for spiritual attacks. They noticed that the battlements were circular. In other words, the guns could turn a full 360 degrees to defend. So our role should be as watchers and defenders looking out for attacks from all angles. Lastly, as they were leaving this place, they noticed how the battlements were in disrepair and broken down, and wondered if there's a spiritual connection here. Echoes of Nehemiah and his rebuilding of the walls. Do our spiritual battlements need rebuilt and strengthened? Someone else was drawn to the story of Hagar when they were praying, and how she, when she was mistreated by her mistress, and also when she was told to leave and banished, she had a couple of different desert experiences. And then at that point, she encountered the God who sees, who gave her hope in a hopeless situation. She then was drawn to an unpleasant picture in her mind of concentration camp victims of the last war. And they had this terrible emaciation, but the worst part was the deadness in their eyes and the lack of hope. And she realised that this was a suffering world. And she thought about Hagar and how God is still watching. And she wondered if this COVID time is helping us gain a deeper understanding of what it is to suffer, which results in a more compassionate heart towards those we meet. Like the Good Samaritan, we develop eyes to see the ones suffering before us. And there are those in our families in Glasgow, in Scotland, the UK and the world who need to be found by the God who sees, through us, His people, who hear His voice. One person who works in hospitals felt God describing COVID to them as a thief, stealing health, life, joy, peace and security. They felt that we need to claim the freedom that God gave us for people to live in all of their fullness. And they went into work later and prayed there. And they heard the words, Jesus is King. He has the authority above it all, even for those who do not yet know it.